Welcome. This is Geography 130, Natural Resources and Population. Is everybody here for that class? Anybody who's not here for this class? Or rather is here but not for this class? Okay, good. I'm Nathan Sayre. I'm the professor. We have two fabulous GSIs. They aren't both named Nathan. Nathan McClintock is down here. Nathan works on urban agriculture, particularly in Oakland, and the potential for the use of vacant or abandoned public lands for community-based or local food production. He is in charge of the first 3 sections of each week. So those are Mondays and Tuesdays. So if you are in a section for Monday or Tuesday, then Nathan is your GSI. His email address is up here. If you need to be in touch with him this week, you have his email. Javier Arbona is the other GSI. He handles the other 3 sections, which are Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Wednesday and Friday. Javier works on the conversion of former military sites into parks in California cities. If you are in one of his sections and you have any questions about the class this week, you should email him. Okay? Oh, here. Let me go back for a second. Did everyone get an email last night notifying you that the slides for this lecture were posted to the BSpace site? Yes. This will be the practice. Unless something happens and I can't get it done in time, I will post the slides for each lecture to BSpace the night before the lecture so that you can, if you wish, print them out, bring them to class, take your notes on the slides, that kind of thing. If for some reason I fail to do it, I apologize. That's just the way it goes. But I should be able to get it done pretty much every time. That's just part of how I will handle the class. I guess we'll just get started. Any of you have any strong feelings about population? How many of you would rank population up there in the top, whatever, 3 or 4 or 5 issues of importance to the world and natural resources today? All right, quite a few of you. How many of you would not put it there? A handful, fewer. Fewer people than would put it. Most of you appear to have no opinion. Is that true? Are you here to develop an opinion? Why do you think it's important? Those of you who say it's important. Thoughts? Yes?
California's running out of water and I want to drink some.
California's running out of water and she wants to drink some. Okay? Yes? Okay, so there are projections that water shortages may be an enormous problem around the world or in many parts of the world in the future. And there are too many people?
Well, as population grows, resources diminish, then you have populations clashing with each other.
Okay. Okay. The more people, everyone needs water to drink. The more people there are, the more demand there is for water. Assuming that the supply is finite, this could become a source of serious conflict in many parts of the world, even rising to the level of a clash of civilizations. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Distribution of resources. And more people. Okay. Okay, so it might be that the problem is not necessarily so much of gross supply and demand, but rather distribution. Obviously, the greater the demand, the more difficult it might be to meet everybody's needs. But unequal or skewed distribution of resources, water being one of the key ones, obviously, but others as well, could create inequalities that foster various kinds of conflict. Okay, so what is the world population? I checked on Friday. It's amazing how easily one can get this number. As of 4:30 in the afternoon on Friday, according to the estimates of the Census Bureau, the world population was 6,796,638,567. Very precise number. The U.S. population was 308,492,283. I imagine these numbers have gone up since Friday afternoon. I didn't check today to see how much. Remarkable that we have such precise estimates, isn't it? And that they are available essentially in real time. But of course, these are estimates. They don't actually count all the people on the Earth at all times, do they? At the top here, you see a graph of world population broken into industrialized countries versus developing countries. These are categories we will see again and again and again this semester. The industrialized countries being generally the affluent ones, the ones we think of as developed, the developing countries being everyone else. You can see that global population as of 1900 was slightly less than 2 billion. By 1950, it was almost 3 billion, and after 1950, it climbed precipitously to the present, roughly 6.7 or 6.8 billion, projected to rise to 9 or 10 billion, something like that, around 2050. According to most projections, it will then level off. Any idea why? Does that seem like a plausible? Yes?
I would guess that has to do with women's rights.
Women's rights. All right, semester's done. We've got it. No, that answer is remarkably on to the best prevailing wisdom. However, it leaps way ahead and leaves rather a lot unexplained, doesn't it? Yes? Like reproduction. Contraceptives, abortion, education. What else comes in here? Yeah. Natural resources can't support such a high population, so there's a limit at something like 9 or 10 billion, and after that, the game's up. It's an interesting hypothesis. I don't believe it's actually borne out. I mean, or maybe we should put it this way: the same thing, that same argument was said in times like 1950. There could be disease. Yeah. There's a lot of different ways that people die. It's true, and eventually everyone does. However, it's closer to this question of women's rights and education, according to the best theories, than it is to the question of limits on finite resources. But again, we're jumping way ahead. That's like the end of the semester. We'll explain all of that. In many ways, what we're going to try to figure out this semester is exactly this shift, this inflection point. What happened roughly there that provoked this sudden increase, this rapid acceleration in the rate of population growth in the world? Why is it that most of that population growth has occurred in the developing world rather than in the industrial world? What happened that caused or prevented such growth rates in the developing world? After all, if it's about natural resources, you would think that it would be, in fact, the industrial developed world where we would see more population growth, right? Because that's where there are more resources. If it were simply a question of how many resources are available to support people, presumably it would have been the first world, or the industrial world, that saw an increase in population. And indeed, population has increased, but it has increased slowly, and in fact, at this point, has largely leveled off. There are parts of the developing world where it is declining, as of now. Here we have a graph of world population and world production from the year 1000 to the year 2000. The red line being population, measured in millions. The blue line being production, measured in billions of 1985 US dollars. And according to this graph, somewhere around 1900, or perhaps we should back it up, 1800, give or take, the slope of that production line exceeded the slope of the population line. And you started to see, Javier's having trouble seeing. You started to see, in fact, production outpacing population in its rate of growth. Yes? Is that production in resources or services or both? Both. This would be production measured the way we measure, say, GDP, right? Now, remember, of course, the way that this graph is scaled is somewhat arbitrary, right? I mean, the graph would seem to imply that every person is somehow equivalent to roughly $1,000 of GDP in 1985 dollars, right? That's where, I mean, if you rearrange the scale, decide to measure it some other way, you might end up with the blue line in a completely different part of the graph from the red line, and it wouldn't be very clear exactly what their relationship was, if anything, right? Their relationship here is essentially a function of the way the graph was put together. However, it does put across one interesting phenomenon, which is that if you thought of these two lines as somehow needing to be in relationship to each other, right? Because every person needs a certain amount of economic output or resources to support them, and you see that, yeah, they do seem to sort of track each other with a nice parallel pattern there for 700 years. Between 1000 AD and 1700 AD, and then something happens here. And remember, this is economic production measured in money, right? It's not measured in water or food or housing, the things that you actually need to live. It's measured in money, which implies some kind of equivalence, which may or may not actually apply in any given circumstance, right? Or any given society. It may apply very poorly back in this period. So we have a second important inflection point that we need to try to understand, and that's here, somewhere in the 18th century, when we see an acceleration in production relative to population growth, and we see simultaneously implicit in this graph the making equivalent of dollars or money and natural resources, the bringing together of a market with the goods and services that people need to survive and reproduce. And again, the relationship does not suggest that there's some kind of cap or limit placed by natural resources on population growth. In fact, the opposite appears to obtain. In the last 300 years, give or take, 250 years, it appears that the production of actual resources has grown more rapidly than the population. So these are the kinds of things that we're going to try to understand. In great part, this class is about understanding this inflection point, what made it possible, and then this one, and what made it possible, and why it's distributed the way it is between the developed and the developing worlds. Any questions? Okay. Goals of the course. To understand current issues and trends in natural resource use and depletion. That is a big part of what we're going to do. To try to understand what the current situation is in the world. There is widespread sentiment that we are in a time of extraordinary environmental problems, right? The list is long, and it's staggering and discouraging and sometimes depressing, and we will talk about a number of those issues, those resources. And we will try to understand exactly which threats are ones we should take seriously, which ones perhaps are exaggerated, how they interrelate with each other, that sort of thing. Secondly, to understand the history of theories of overpopulation, especially in relation to political economy and ecology. So in relationship to the economy, the market, and in relationship to the environment and natural resources. I say in the introduction to the syllabus, that first paragraph, that for the past 200 plus years, in the English-speaking world, overpopulation has been a source of serious, sometimes hyperbolic concern. Thomas Malthus's essay, which we will read parts of, is the sort of paradigmatic treatment of this, right? What does he say in that essay? Anybody know? Yeah. Right, it's hard to remember the adjectives, right? Population grows more quickly, according to Malthus, than production. And the terms in which he frames this, and these are terms we will encounter again and again and again and again, are basically two. The number of people in the world, or in a given part of the world, and the amount of food. There is a tendency to sort of simplify the whole problem down to those two variables. Food, people. And the basic argument he makes is that population of people grows geometrically, exponentially. It's a compounding phenomenon, right? Each generation will then procreate and grow, so it's not just arithmetic. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, right? And he says food can't grow that way. We can't expect each farm field to have children, more farm fields that then have more children and keep you, no, land is finite. Arable soil is finite. Therefore, food production will only grow in an arithmetic fashion, incrementally, and it cannot possibly keep up with the growth in human population. And therefore, we will face shortages, misery, vice. Apocalypse, in many ways, is the way he dresses it up. Now, of course, that's completely belied by this, is it not? I mean, the basic core argument is empirically false. It's intuitively compelling. It seems to make sense. The only problem with it, well, actually not the only problem, but the basic problem with it is that it's empirically false. And it has been for at least the 200 odd years since he published it. He published it and republished his essay 6 times in his life. The first one in 1798, the last one in 1834, I think, just before he died, or maybe right after he died. And it kept getting longer. He kept making it longer. I mean, it went from being a fairly succinct tract to being this sprawling treatise. And the reason it kept getting longer is he kept having to try harder to make the argument hold water. And the longer it got, the more it seemed obvious that, in fact, it wasn't going to hold water. And we're not going to read the 6th edition, 6th version. We're going to read like the 2nd, because nobody reads the 6th one anymore. I'm not sure you can even find it in print. His argument was essentially falsified, debunked, torn to shreds before he died. So one of the questions we're going to ask this semester is, how is it that his argument continues to carry so much weight? It is so widely embraced. It is treated as essentially almost conventional wisdom. in a lot of circles. And I just want to tell you right up front, it don't work. The theory don't work. And it is a source of some curiosity to me that it's so hard for that simple fact to prevail in most circles. Something about that argument is hard to let go of, regardless of its empirical coherence or, for that matter, its theoretical coherence, because we will see it also contains a great deal of theoretical convolutions and confusion. Any questions? Now, I want to clarify up front that that's not to say that population is somehow irrelevant, unimportant, immaterial, not something to think about. By all means, there's no question about it. People need and use resources. If there aren't enough resources for all the people, there are going to be problems. And to that extent, the number of people is an obviously important matter. It's a question, rather, of how we think about it, how we understand it, and how we think about what that relationship really is between populations and natural resources. Okay. These are the books. I'm hopeful that they are, or soon will be, available to you at NEDS and ASUC. I've gotten a few emails suggesting that that's not the case. How many people are having trouble getting the books? Several of you. Anything that I can do about it, you think?
I think it's the Connolly is due tomorrow.
Okay. Okay. The Connolly I only added to this reading list about a week ago.
Oh,
And the Malthus?
when I checked that wasn't ASUC, but you can get it at NEDS under PEIS 100.
Okay. The Malthus is not available at NEDS, but it is available at NEDS under a different class. PEIS 100? 100, yes. Yes. Excuse me? Yes. The Malthus is on Google Books because it's so old, right? Nobody has a copyright on it anymore. You can easily get it. If you look closely at the syllabus and figure out which chapters we're reading, you'll discover that it's not actually that much of the book. It seems to me it's actually not a bad book to own, given its significance. On the other hand, if you don't wish to buy it and you just want to get the selections that you need off of Google Books, just make sure you're reading the right edition, right? Because like I said, there's 6 of them that might be out there. Yeah. They should also be on Course Reserve, but that would be up in Macomb in the EPS library because this is a geography class and that's where we send those lists. They should be there, but if they're not, let me know. The other books, we'll read Malthus fairly early in the semester. Massimo's Livi-Bacci's A Concise History of World Population. Again, there are multiple editions. This is the most recent, the 4th edition. We will read over the course of the semester, sort of chunks of it early and much of it later on. That is written, he's a demographer. It very nicely summarizes what we know about world population, how it has grown, how it has changed, the factors that demographers consider important, the theories and tools that demographers have developed to understand the dynamics of populations, that sort of thing. It's not a textbook, but it functions somewhat like a textbook in this course insofar as it provides very solid basic information. Mike Davis's Late Victorian Holocausts, we will read slightly later. It discusses events in the 19th century, primarily, in a number of places around the world. It focuses about half on India, and those are the sections we will be reading. We will not read the sections in which he talks about Brazil and China and parts of Africa, other parts of the world. We will focus on his treatment of India. It's a discussion of how famines occurred in mostly late 19th century India in the context of British colonialism and its relationship to El Nino and global weather, global climate, and the changing understanding of global climate at that time. So it will bring together both the actual events on the ground, actual people, food supplies, food shortages, the death of many millions of people from famine, and how that was related both to colonial power and to colonial science. Finally, Matthew Connolly's book, Fatal Misconception, we will read somewhat later. It is, as the subtitle suggests, a history of efforts to control world population. It takes place principally in the 20th century, and interestingly, India is a major focus of that work as well. We will look at the ways in which population became the object of international development policies and rather coercive, severe efforts to control population growth, efforts that were global in their application, but were particularly pronounced, again, in India. And this is a recent book, 2008. I only had a chance to read it over Christmas break, hence its late incorporation into the syllabus. Are there any questions about the books? There will also be other readings, quite a few other readings. At this point, my plan is to post them all to BSpace, and in fact, they are there now. Is there anybody who, for whatever reason, would like to see them in a course reader rather than on BSpace? 1, 2, 3. Okay, I will try to get them into a reader quickly. Okay, the first week or two you may have to rely on BSpace. Most of the readings are not long, and it shouldn't be a huge burden if you need to print them out for the first couple weeks. Yeah. I'm sorry. Oh yes, yes, those aren't all there yet, are they? There are also selections from a couple of other monographs that we read shortly after the middle point of the semester, if I remember, from Dust Bowl, and also from a book called First the Seed. Those selections we will scan and post to BSpace as well. Yes, those aren't there yet. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, correct. Everything that would be in the reader will be on BSpace. There's no reason to buy the reader unless you'd rather do it that way rather than either read it off your computer screen or print them out yourself. Okay. Podcasts. The lectures are being podcast. Assuming that there aren't technical problems, which usually happens once or twice a semester, the lectures should be available, just the audio, on this website after each lecture. And you are more than welcome to download them and listen to them again. If you are feeling like you have the flu,